From increasing technologies, there are so many electronics that we can now put into our overlanding vehicles. From mobile phones, smartwatches, laptops, cameras, drones, 12-volt coolers and water pumps, along with auxiliary lighting, there are so many things that can put additional strain on our vehicles. Start loading all of these accessories onto your standard auxiliary battery, you'll be lucky just to last a couple of days off-grid. So there is no doubt that solar is one of the most efficient and most popular ways to charge our vehicle's auxiliary battery system without having to run the vehicles for hours during the day. Now, not all solar panels are made equally, and unfortunately some of the advertising is not always correct either. So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about a few of the different types and how buying a cheap option is not always going to work so well if you're looking for an efficient power solution. Now, I've spoken about solar panels before on this channel. Specifically, I've spoken about the 120 watt solar panel that is permanently mounted to the roof of the vehicle. And I've also discussed some of the pros and cons for permanent mounted versus portable panels. So in today's episode, we're going to be focusing on portable panels. I'm going to show you how I run my setup, talk about some of the different types, and introduce you to a new panel that has well and truly upgraded my off-grid power management system. Now, if you've watched some of my previous videos, you may recognize these panels here. These are the 80 watt Projecta folding solar panels. Now, I've had these units now for about 9 years, and they're still holding up very, very well. Given the state of condition and the age of these panels, I'm very happy with the output given the 80 watt rating, and the fact that Projecta are still making them to date, retailing for around the $500 mark, would suggest they've done something right with these panels and they're holding up to the test of time. Now, 80 watt has done me quite well over the years in conjunction with the 120 watt that's mounted on the roof of the Cruiser. It negates most of the fridge current draw along with some of the other accessories and allows me to stay off grid for quite some time. However, with more and more electronics being added to the vehicle, it was time to start looking at an upgrade for my portable panels. So as some of you may be aware, a little while ago I released a comprehensive review on the Bluetti AC200 power station. Now, I've genuinely been impressed by the performance and the quality of this unit, and when I asked Bluetti whether they would be willing to send a few solar panels to accompany this unit for review, I was glad to hear they were happy to help. So while I was waiting for these to arrive, I went out and found the cheapest 200 watt solar panels on the market to compare with these Bluetti systems, and this is what I got. So I found this, the cheapest 200 watt folding solar panel I could find on eBay, at a bargain price of only $129, and with German certification. How could I go wrong? So a couple of weeks went by and this arrived. This is our German certified grade A solar cell 200 watt eBay solar panel. Now, my first impressions were quite disappointing. Just based on the size alone, we can see here that it is very, very unlikely to bring in that claimed 200 watt. Now we can open up the zip pocket that comes on the back of one of these panels here, and we're met with a cheap PWM controller with some USB ports and a couple of adapters. Now, the specifications allege an 18 volt open circuit along with 11.1 amp current. The folding action and the setup of the panels is convenient and works reasonably well, but this would have to be one of the only positives so far. So it was time to compare the Bluetti 200 watt solar panel to our eBay special. This is the Bluetti SP200 solar panel. Now, straight away you can see this panel is significantly larger than the others. It's running a similar style of folding design, but that is about where the similarities end. The quality of this panel is obvious straight away, and opening up the pocket here, we can see a simple heavy-duty 12-gauge wire sealed into the back of the unit, and this is fitted with an industry-standard MC4 connector. Bluetti rate this panel as water-resistant, and I would feel a lot more comfortable with this in poor weather than the eBay panel, particularly with those exposed USB ports. Now, there are two clips holding these panels together, and the panels are designed in a similar fashion to our Chinese panels. However, there are some differences. The Bluetti unit is supplied with 4 rear legs to hold the panel on an angle, but these legs are wide and rigid, meaning that these panels will hold well even with a light wind. What's even more convenient is the small elastic running from the leg straps to the panel, meaning that when you pick up and pack away this panel, the legs easily fold away and velcro back to the rear of the panel. Now, having these 3 panels side by side, we can see there are significant differences between all types. However, the one similarity that all 3 of them share is they are all running monocrystalline type solar cells. This being said though, the Bluetti is running a monocrystalline cell referred to as SunPower Cells, hence the name SP200. The SunPower cells are more efficient than conventional monocrystalline cells as they're able to capture more sunlight. These cells have no grid line electrical contacts on the rear, allowing for more sunlight absorption. Further, the SunPower cells incorporate a solid rear copper back, which means they are less prone to cracking and fracturing with movement or the expansion and contraction with temperature change. In addition to this, they are also not as easily affected by partial coverage for shade. Now, all of these benefits mean that we get an efficient solar panel into a compact size, weighing less, yet still achieving some great results. All specifications for this panel are printed on the inside of the zip pocket where the cables are stored. At 20 volt and 10 amp, multiplying this together will give us our 200 watt total efficiency in optimal conditions. Now obviously, with numerous factors involved, things like environmental factors, the efficiency of the panel and our battery charging system, we are hoping to get somewhere in the high 80% efficiency for a panel like this. Now there was no doubt that these panels here have been designed to work in conjunction with the Bluetti AC200 power station. However, they can also be used in any application to charge any sort of battery as long as there's a solar charger between the panel and the battery you're charging. So let's start with some of the factors that we have to take into account when using these panels with the power station. Now, if you have watched my previous video on this AC200 power station, you will know that this is a market leader in terms of its solar charger, bringing in from 35 volt all the way up to 150 volt of solar input and converting that into charge for this lithium phosphate battery. Now, as some of you may have picked up from going over the specifications of our 200 watt panel here, we only have an open voltage of 20 volt. So this means theoretically that plugging in one of these panels into this power station isn't going to work. So let's have a look and see what happens. And when we do plug in one of those panels, we have no input coming into the unit. Now in my case here, I've been provided 3 of these SP200 watt panels, and we can hook them up in series in order to make sure that voltage is lifted to activate the input charge into the power station. And before we move on, I want to very quickly talk about the difference between hooking up circuits in series and in parallel, and both when and why we do these different types of connections. So starting off with a parallel connection. This is when all components are connected across each other's leads, resulting in no more than 2 sets of electrical common points. What this means is there can be many paths of flow, but there can only be one voltage. Now, for example, in a practical sense with the solar panels we have here, winding them in parallel essentially means connecting the 2 positive leads together to create one single positive outlet and the 2 negative leads together to create one negative outlet. Now you can do that quite easily by using some of these little adapters here, which I've got 4 MC4 connectors. That just simply allows you to plug in both of your positive leads into a single terminal, and the same again for the negatives. Now in our case here with the solar panels, if we were to do that and plug this into the Bluetti system as is, we're still not going to get any charge input, even though there is 400 watt of solar connected, and that's because the 2 voltages of the panel are not combined and it still remains at that 20 volts. Now another common example of a parallel connection in a 4-wheel drive is when you're expanding battery capacities. If you wire the 2 positives and 2 negatives together of 2 12-volt batteries, you're going to double the battery capacity. However, you're still going to remain with that more commonly used 12 volt. Now a series connection is when all components are connected end to end to form a single line to which current can flow. So an example of our solar panels here, in order to create a series connection, all we're going to be doing is grabbing the positive from our first panel, connecting that across to our negative of the second panel, grabbing the positive of the second panel and plugging that into the third, and so on and so on. What that's going to do is also increase the wattage. For example, if we had these 2 connected here, we're still going to get our 400 watts of solar, and we're going to be left with a negative from the first panel and a positive from the second. We can then plug this into the Bluetti system, and this is going to give us a combined voltage of 40 volt, which is the 2 panels connected together. This is therefore going to activate that solar charger at the minimum volt of 35 and therefore give us some input into the power station. Now generally when connecting solar panels, it is more efficient to connect them in a series setup. However, there are some limitations in regards to the car charging, but we'll get onto that a little bit later on. We can see here that we have 3 Bluetti SP200 watt panels wired in series together to terminate into a single positive and negative terminal. Using the adapter and plugging this into the Bluetti system, we can immediately see a state of charge going into the power station. So plugging these 3 panels in series together and hooking up to this power station here, we saw some awesome results. We saw a peak wattage of 595 watts, although I only held it for a very short second. That's equivalent to 99% efficiency. So something tells me that these panels are maybe a little bit overclocked, and they actually are slightly bigger than a 200 watt panel to bring in some results like that. However, overall, we saw an average of around the 540 watt mark, and you're averaging there at about 90% efficiency, which is really, really high for any form of solar panel. Now, in the world of solar panels, you're never going to expect to reach that 100% efficiency. There are numerous factors, including the efficiency of the panel themselves, the cabling length, environmental factors, and also the battery charger that you're using. But a high 80 to 90% is something that you're really looking for, and it's going to be some of your top quality solar cells. So reaching 90% here with these 3 Bluetti in series is very, very impressive. Now this would also mean that having these 3 wired in series together would be able to charge this 2000 watt hour lithium iron phosphate battery in just over 3 hours, which is also very impressive. Now some of you might recognize that if you divide that 2000 watt hours by the 540 received, you might be looking at a little bit under 4 hours. However, if you've watched my previous video on the review of this power station here, you're looking at 1684 usable watt hours on this power station when you look at the reserve and also the efficiency of the AC and DC chargers or inverters inside the unit. Now again, looking at that menu on that Bluetti system, we can see there that we're bringing in around 57 volt, which is again very efficient for having these 3 wired in series. We can see that combination of each of the 20 volt panels, bringing in a very healthy, respectable figure there. Now if we have a look at the amps there, we're running at about 9 or just over 9 amps input. Now those who are familiar with 12 volt systems may not find this very impressive. However, when you consider we're running at 57 volt, that is therefore calculating into a significant amount of charge into that battery. So we can see there that these solar panels are very efficient when it comes to charging that Bluetti power station. And so they should. They're made by the same manufacturer and designed specifically to charge a power station just like that. However, what if you don't have a power station and you just want to use these solar panels to charge the 12 volt system in your vehicle? We're going to put a few of these to the test and see how efficient they are at converting down to 12 volt and charging our auxiliary batteries. Now one thing you need to understand is you can't just go ahead and plug these Bluetti solar panels directly to your battery and expect to charge. These panels are unregulated, which means they have to be fed through some sort of solar charger in order to safely and effectively charge up and manage that auxiliary battery. Now for me on my Cruiser here, I'm using a Redarc BC-DC 1240 charger, which not only manages the batteries and the power management system, but also has a solar input as well. So for me, I've mounted my solar input up on top of the grill up here, and this is just in the form of a red Anderson plug. Now just like the Bluetti power station, the BC-DC 1240 is also bound by minimum and maximum voltages for its solar input. So here we're looking at a 17.5 volt minimum and a 32 volt maximum. So straight away we can see that one of these panels is going to fit in that range and hopefully charge up these panels effectively. However, we're not going to be able to wire these panels in series together as the voltage is going to be too high at that 40 or even 60 volt with 3 in series. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab 2 of the Bluetti panels, we're going to wire them in parallel together using those MC4 connectors, and we're going to put them through the Redarc BC-DC charger and see what sort of charge we can get out, monitoring it through the Victron gauge. Now just for your information, the smaller equivalent of this, the BC-DC 1225, can accept up to 375 watt of solar, and this BC-DC 1240 can accept up to 600 watt. Now you can overload the wattage of these units, however the unit will only accept and only charge the batteries to that maximum value. You cannot, however, overload the voltage. Any more than 32 volts through this charger will activate an overload alarm and therefore not be efficient and not charge these batteries up. Now I will note just before we get started, the solar panel on top of the roof up here has been disconnected and all the switchable accessories have been turned off. This car does have a small negative drain when looking at about 0.2 amps there when sitting at idle like it is at the moment. Today we're going to be viewing all of our inputs through the Victron gauge. This is going to give us our amperage and our wattage inputs through each solar panel. So plugging these in now, we'll switch across to our Victron monitor and we'll have a look at what we get. So we're going to start by just plugging in one of the solar panels just to see how that performs by itself. Now we can see here it's a little bit of a slow start as the battery charger realizes and accepts that solar input and then slowly ramps up the wattage input there to get to an optimal level. So for one 200 watt Bluetti panel, we're looking at receiving a maximum there of about 146 watts, and that's at 11.4 amps. So we can see there's quite a good input there, and we're achieving an efficiency there of about 73%. Now plugging in those two panels, we can see again it takes a little bit of time for the system to realize and detect and then absorb some of that solar input, but over time we can see that value slowly rise. You can see a maximum there of 268 watts coming in at 21 amps, and that's just huge for a 12-volt system. Now with these two panels in parallel together, we have seen a little bit of a drop in efficiency there, down to 67%. Now keeping in mind that the drop in efficiency from that 90 to 99% we saw with the Bluetti power station is not fault of the panel, but more so the loss of power through the battery charger here. We have to convert those 20 volts down to 12 volt to efficiently and safely charge these batteries here, and that's going to have some power loss in that process. Now, that small efficiency loss that we saw between the 1 and 2 panels in parallel, again is going to be the fact that we are linking those panels in parallel rather than series. Series is going to be more efficient, however, as we've discussed, it's not going to be possible in this instance with this charger only accepting a maximum of 32 volt. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to plug in the Projecta 80 watt folding panels, keeping in mind these are 9 years old, they've been all around the country, they are looking a bit rough, and the protecting coating over the solar panel cells themselves is not that great, so we're going to see how well that performs after 9 years of use. Now plugging in those Projecta panels, we can see a very respectable 60 watt. Considering how small these panels are in terms of their rating, that is still a great efficiency there of 75% given that they are so old. Now although the maximum was 60 watt, we did average around the 57 watt, averaging about 4.46 amps. That's still very, very healthy. It's now time to plug in the Chinese panels, keeping in mind that these are still rated to 200 watt just like the Bluetti system is. So let's see how they perform. Now the first thing I noticed when I plugged in the panels is that PWM controller that comes with it from factory didn't even work out of the box. We had no power to the display, nothing was working, and therefore it's rendering the panels useless. So that is very disappointing to begin with. However, what I have done is I've taken off the grey Anderson plug directly from the panel, making it an unregulated panel, and we're going to run that straight through the Red Arc BC-DC system and allow that to regulate and control the power input. Now plugging these panels in, we can see we've only got up to 57 watt at 4.4 amps. So again, it is bringing in something, but when you consider these are 200 watt panels, you're only achieving an efficiency there of 28%. Now given that we're only bringing in 57 watt, which is less than we're getting from our 80 watt panels, I'm almost going to guarantee you that these panels are not 200 watt, and I was the victim of some false advertising online. Either way, they are still bringing in some input, however, it's nowhere near what they quoted to be. So there we have it guys, that is a comparison between 3 solar panels that I have been carrying around in my Landcruiser. And I think it's fair to say, and I think we should be able to agree, that not all solar panels are created equally. Not only that, but they're not also marketed as maybe they perhaps should be. Now one of the biggest advantages to these AC200 panels is that I can charge up numerous different devices or batteries. I can charge up that Bluetti power station very quickly. I can also charge up the batteries in my vehicle and also the batteries in my future van whenever it decides to come. Now having 3 of these and wiring them in series together also enables me to charge that AC200P Bluetti power station very, very quickly. Now the advantage with that is it makes it more of a viable unit to use when off-grid and camping. I can now power high demand devices and know that on a reasonable day I can charge that battery in just a few hours. Now as you can see from the theme here today, I only use one type of portable panel, and that is these canvas soft backing folding solar panels. I find they fit very nicely into the back of the car, integrate in with other gear, and a little bit easier to maneuver than those aluminium framed rigid panels. Now the Bluetti SP200 is by no means a small panel. When folded up, you're looking at about 520 millimeters wide by about 530 millimeters tall, which is no small feat. However, if 200 watt is something that you just don't need, Bluetti also offer a 120 watt panel in the exact same design as this for those who are looking for a little bit less, or maybe just a smaller sized panel. Now everyone's going to have an individual circumstance which is going to determine what size and what sort of power requirements you need to live off grid if that's what you choose to do. Now, this Bluetti system here retails for about $729 at the time of making this video. It's Australian dollars, and it is currently on sale for that price when you compare that to $129 for this cheap Chinese eBay panel. Now maybe the cheap Chinese panel and 60 watt of power coming in is all you need. In that case, it might be good value. However, if you are looking for a genuine and efficient 200 watt solar panel, then this Bluetti system has really exceeded that through the test that we've put it through today. Particularly if you're looking at powering a power station like the Bluetti AC200P, you can see that efficiency is very, very optimal. These panels and the voltage that it runs at have been designed to work very, very well in conjunction with that unit, and it's going to make it a very viable unit or battery power source while you're out in the bush. So guys, I'll link all of the products that I used today in the description below. Make sure to check them out if you are looking to buy any of them, including those adapters for the MC4 connectors. I've hoped you've enjoyed today's video. I hope you've learned something new about solar panels, and hopefully I've raised some awareness about some of this false advertising from these companies that advertise on eBay. Otherwise guys, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Cheers. Perfect day for solar video. Until you want to go testing the panels.